Hey guys, what's going on? So I wanted to cover the timeline of Barbara Gordon and her comic book history as Batgirl and Oracle. And we have a lot of different instances of her character, how she's evolved over time. And in addition to even different multiverses and different versions of canon, there also has been several different writers with different creative interests in terms of their take on the character. So that's really what's led to a few different primary versions of her. So we know Barbara Gordon is the daughter of Jim Gordon and Eileen Keene. You do have a few different versions of her mother. You have her mother being listed as Barbara in the Christopher Nolan trilogy, for example, but the main thing here is that she is the daughter of the Gotham Police Commissioner, Jim Gordon, and that's really where she gets her connection with Batman, even though they kind of run into each other on different occasions. So the first thing we know about Barbara in the earlier adaptations of the comics, we know that her father moved to Gotham City, and after her parents divorced, her mother left to Europe. And that's really where this version of Barbara Gordon went off to boarding school. We know from a very young age she developed a photographic memory. So that's really where her education would start. And we see just across the board in terms of her different versions that Barbara Gordon is an extremely intelligent character. So moving on from the boarding school origin of her, we also have her at age 14 moving back to Gotham, starting to take college level classes, even though this would be the average age for a middle school student or ongoing freshman. And then on top of this, she moved back in with her father since he was the one living in Gotham. And really, we have a pretty quick evolution into her journey into becoming Batgirl. Really different than I'd say the other primary characters we have in the Batman universe, and even more specifically the Bat family, because in the first editions of the comic books for her origin, we have Barbara Gordon becoming Batgirl at age 16. Didn't go through a lot of the trials and traumas that other versions had, such as Bruce, Dick, or Jason Todd. So we know the real origin for Batgirl was that she was dressed as a female version of Batman just for fun on Halloween, and was going to a Halloween party when she stumbled upon a crime that happened in front of her. I believe it was some sort of a kidnapping, and that's where she really intervened, and that's really where she continued to don that same exact costume and adopt the identity of Batgirl. And because this is a pretty quick jump into that character, we do have some other comics later on that kind of go back and explain it a little bit better. You have her at an extremely young age take her own martial arts lessons as a kid. So that you could pile on with her boarding school years, or just a different version of her character growing up. So that's what would explain her skills in being able to intervene in that circumstance. But I think it is a pretty interesting origin because you don't have any sort of death, whether it's her parents. You have that again with Dick, Jason, and Bruce. So I think it's just a little bit more of a genuine act for her, really starting her superhero journey. And then beyond this, going back to her education, we know that at age 17, she attended college fully and graduated early from high school, started attending Gotham University, and that's where she started studying library science, in addition to still donning the alter ego of Batgirl. And then I'd say we have the most drastic change on her character at age 19. That's where you have a lot of the instances in Batman the Killing Joke, where Barbara Gordon gets kidnapped. In some versions, it's with her dad and her stepmom, and then in others, it's just the Joker kind of breaking in or startling her in her apartment. But that's where the Joker shoots her and is able to get her spine, which leaves her paralyzed. So really takes away any abilities she has of Batgirl. But you also have a few different versions where this doesn't happen, and she continues the mantle of Batgirl unharmed. But I'll get back to that in a little bit. So following her injury here, age 21, still is able to complete her bachelor's degree despite her new condition. And then in a lot of continuities, she would go on to get her PhD in library sciences. And also during this time, when we are looking at the paralyzed version of her, we do have her going to train with Richard Dragon for combat and just overall mobility in her wheelchair. The most similar thing you could think of would be like training for the wheelchair Olympics or the Special Olympics. So she does have that as part of her journey of just adjusting to her new condition. And then following this is really where we get her evolution into her new identity, which is Oracle. So this is really where she starts to build equipment in the Watchtower in downtown Gotham. So she spends about a year doing this, and then about age 23 is where she officially starts as her new identity. Now she is Oracle instead of Batgirl and works primarily out of the Watchtower and does a lot of information technology work. She's able to help Batman or Nightwing or anyone else in that nature with a lot of information that they need on the streets when they're in action. She gets a lot of her information, whether it's from public articles, newspapers, even is able to get access to the CIA and FBI database. Also has a ton of hacking skills. The closest analogy I would give to this is the character Penelope Garcia in Criminal Minds, how she's able to get a lot of information from the office and give it out to a lot of the agents on the field. Like Derek Morgan and her have a really special relationship. I would say that's pretty much her new role between her and Batman. And I really think even despite her condition, this version of her really takes being a superhero to the next level in a much more modern sense in terms of her skills on the computer. And since she isn't able to engage physically, she's able to have such a drastic effect just by serving in this role. So I think that's really fitting, especially to her intelligence. And she even goes further beyond this, beyond just helping out Batman and the rest of the Bat family. We have at age 24, this is when she starts the group Birds of Prey, kind of like as an extension to what Batman is doing. And this isn't to be confused with the spin-off movie to Suicide Squad with Harley Quinn. This would mostly consist of Black Canary and the Huntress. So she started this on her own, is leading the group, and even extends this. She gets also an invitation from Amanda Waller to help out with a lot of information for the Justice League. So she really has a drastic impact there, continuing her journey as Oracle, and that's where we even get instances of some pretty impressive feats with her work with the Justice League. We have her outsmarting Brainiac. We also have the Watchtower getting destroyed at one place, and then she's able to actually relocate her office in Metropolis. So that's really the bread and butter of what we get with her character as Oracle. I will say in a little bit different fork on the road path, if we are taking out that version of her getting shot by the Joker and getting paralyzed, you do have her continuing as Batgirl between 19 to 23. That's when she would continue her crime fighting and was still physically able to engage in combat and utilize her martial arts abilities. And this is also where she would go on to be the new head of the Gotham City Public Library after getting her doctorate degree. So that was really her day job, and then she was doing a lot of the vigilante work at night. And I really think that's an interesting dynamic for her character. And then on this version, we even have another fork in the road. We have one version of her that in her 30s really wants to approach her crime fighting and her search for overall justice a different way. And that's where she decides to run for Congress. When she does get voted into the House of Representatives, she goes to Washington, D.C. to serve as a member, and that's where she gives up her days of fighting as Batgirl and just tries to do a lot with policies. So we really see that version of her continue on. And in that instance, you even have Dick Grayson working for her in her campaign. So just an interesting little fact there. And then going back to that fork in the road, in terms of approaching justice from a different way, we also have the version of her that decides to become a police officer to really make a difference. This would also be in her approximate 30s. And that's the version, I would say, where she works her way up into becoming a cop and then assumingly a detective and continues to get promoted all the way up into the timeline of Batman Beyond. At the very beginning, before we get that time jump when Bruce Wayne is really having his last go at being Batman, I would say since Barbara is about anywhere from 10 to 15 years younger, you could argue 5, but I'd say it's probably closer to 10. I'd say Barbara Gordon is about in her 40s and 50s. And this is also where we do have a pretty big disconnect in the Bat family. So I would say then after that time jump, just looking at the main timeline of the show, where we do have the version of Barbara Gordon that continued her work in the police department and then is now the Gotham Police Commissioner like her father. She appears to be in her mid-60s or early 70s, just given that age difference to Bruce. So I really think that would be a good full circle for her character. And then we have several other cameos of her in various projects, but I would say those are the main ones to touch on. And then, of course, we were going to have that spinoff of her with the Batgirl movie. That ended up getting canceled, so I really think it's a great opportunity to utilize her character further in the future. I think even as soon as the Batman movies with Robert Pattinson, I think Barbara Gordon would be an excellent character to utilize there, and you could kind of use a lot of the different plans that they had for the Batgirl movie. And I think just in terms of her overall character, I really think you have a lot here with Barbara Gordon, but what really stands out, I think, is her intelligence. Depending on whether or not she is paralyzed, I think that's always something that stands out for her. So I really think that's why her inclusion in any sort of Batman universe would be great, or even her own movie, because I really think you have a great character here, but really would be great to see her in action and see a really cool Batgirl suit on the big screen. So those are my thoughts on Barbara Gordon and just a little bit of a timeline for the direction of her character. So feel free to let me know which version of Barbara Gordon you like the best. Appreciate you guys watching, and I'll see you later.